Good afternoon already. I hope this finds you well. Happy Friday. I wanted to go live to talk to you guys about how to quote unquote convince your spouse to move abroad. As you've seen, I've had my husband on the channel a few weeks ago, and we had a great discussion, two discussions about our plan to move abroad, and really having a discussion about our very different styles and very different opinions about where we want to go and what's important for each of us. And so today I wanted to help you out with some suggestions on what you can do to get your spouse on board for a potential move abroad. Okay, so if you're joining live, say hi. Hey, Aileen. Hi, good to see you. Thank you for joining live. And so I did a video, I think it was 2 years ago, about that same topic, but I figured this would be a great topic to revisit, and that is relevant because, like I said, I think yesterday, during the election, there was a wave of moving abroad, and a lot of people wanted to start that research. And then again, after the inauguration, a lot of people started researching even more and getting more serious about potentially leaving the U.S. or wherever you're living. And so now it's a big conversation. Okay, a lot of couples, specifically a lot of families, are having that conversation. If you're single, then you have that freedom of not having to have the discussion with a spouse, and you get to go if you want to go. So that's a big plus. But if you have a spouse that you still need to convince and who's not really on board, then you need some extra steps to get done before you can actually take that leap. So I have a few suggestions for you. First of all, the fact that we are starting a new year, hopefully you have a conversation about plans with your spouse, right? So whenever you're setting goals for the family, you are setting that goal as well. So put that in the hat, whether you have financial goals like getting out of debt or getting the kids into private schools or anything like that. Put the goal of moving abroad in the hat as well. Put that on the schedule, something that you need to discuss with your spouse. Okay, make it a family goal, not just your own personal goal and then presenting it to him, but more like, let's talk about this thing. Let's see how this thing could be possible for our family. For my husband and I, it was a conversation that we had very, very early on. And we went through phases because it wasn't, the idea of moving abroad didn't always look the same as it looks like today. And we were not always agreeing on the timing. Okay, at first he was the one who was more interested in moving abroad and specifically going to Cameroon, and I was like, no, I'm not interested in that at all right now, like probably in the future. And then he was not interested in that anymore. I mean, not interested, but he wasn't pushing for that anymore. And then once I started working online and then having my online business, I was the one who was more pushing for, okay, moving abroad would look really, really good for us, right? And so it wasn't something, and back then we didn't even have 4 kids. We still had, I think we only had 2. And I was really into the whole digital nomad thing, like not necessarily having a new base, but more like, okay, let's do the around the world thing. Let's just be like digital nomad. And he was like, I don't think so. And so we both had our ideas, but at different times. And then when 2020 happened and most people had to work online, then okay, the conversation re-emerged again. And I think the timing was better for us. And then we had a more in-depth conversation about how that could look like for us. So having those conversations are really, really important. And I think that mostly for men, because they're such problem solvers, like whenever you have an issue, men really want to solve the issue. Approaching it as a solution instead of a problem, I think that that's a better approach, because then it's not another problem that they have to solve. And so I highly recommend that you bring it as a plan instead of how can we make it work, and then he has to solve that problem, right? On top of the other things that he has to solve. But preparing a plan, like having a structure, an idea of how things can work already, even if you don't have the whole solution, but at least having something substantial. That way it's not, okay, this is the problem and this is going to take a lot of his time to solve, okay? Another thing is that you can think outside of the box. So it's not so much of a radical decision, but you can look at it as, okay, what can we do differently from our usual vacation, and like compromise in how it would look like. So it's not a full on let's leave everything next month and move abroad, but what can we do this year in 2025 that would get us closer to a move abroad. So maybe it's taking a longer vacation, so it's not maybe staying at hotels but staying more at Airbnbs, so staying in local areas and less touristy areas. It could be also to take a sabbatical. How about taking a sabbatical from his job, from your job? That way, that will get you closer to what a full-on move abroad could be like. Or it could be taking more scouting trips. So doing it together and deciding on what could be those destinations, what could be these countries, those cities where you guys see yourself living in the next, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, and so that you can start taking scouting trips to these destinations, spending a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or even more at those destinations. And that would be a great compromise. I mean, marriage in itself is all about compromises, right? It's not like one person is winning all the time and the other person is never winning, or vice versa. It's like you both have to know that sometimes you just have to give more, right? And so having those compromises where it's not like, oh, we're gonna move abroad by September and then we're out. Maybe not. Okay, how can we make it work for both parties? Right? So again, so in terms of the timing, but also in terms of the destination, maybe you're not agreeing on where to go. And so taking a scouting trip to each of the destinations could be a great way for you guys to make a decision. That's something that we did because for my husband, it was mostly Cameroon for his top destination, and me, it was mostly Cote d'Ivoire. And so having the opportunity to visit both is a great way to be a little more objective with the decision. So it's not just like, okay, it's this way or the highway, but more like, okay, these are the pros and cons for each of the destinations. And if you watch the previous videos that I did with my husband, like the part 1, 2, and 3, on part 3, I think there was all the points, all the pros, like everything was going really well for Cameroon, okay? And nothing was really going well for Cote d'Ivoire. And in other parts, like on certain other points, Cote d'Ivoire was winning a lot of points, all right? So it's really about evaluating and trying to be as objective as possible and looking at, okay, how would these destinations work for our family in terms of cost of living, in terms of how far it is from the US if you have to come back and visit family, if it's the type of visas available, how long can you stay there with your American passport without requiring a resident status, or anything like that. Or maybe it's the food, maybe it's the language, things like that that would be important for you, and trying to do a column and comparing these different destinations. Okay, so having those conversations are really important. I think that another point on top of problem solvers, the fact that usually husbands are the ones looking for safety, not only their own safety but the safety for the family. So is this going to be safe? That would be a big red flag for them. So knowing how can you present it in a way that doesn't raise that flag. So how maybe similar it is to your culture here or to your environment here, or maybe different. How maybe that's the good thing, is that it's really different, and that will make it a lot safer for you and your family. How involved do they have to be in the process of making you safe? Do they have to walk with you everywhere you go? Do they have to drive you everywhere you go? Are they comfortable with you being walking the streets by yourself? And that's something that I remember Herman said, Herman from H&D Abroad, that was a concern of his in choosing destination, and if Dee was going to be okay walking by herself in the streets, and was he going to be nervous about her being out there by herself. And that's a real concern for husbands most of the time. And for us as wives, we're like, who cares, I'm fine, right? But for husbands, it's like, okay, I need to make sure that she's okay. And even if you feel safe, the fact that he's not at ease, that's going to be a problem, Okay, if he always has to worry about it, then that's not going to be peaceful for him. Okay, so taking that into consideration as well is really, really important. And I think that bringing that scenario and bringing that possibility of moving abroad in a very calm way, as a solution, as an opportunity, more than, oh, we need to get out of here, and being in panic mode. Because panic mode is not going to help anybody. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help your spouse. It's not going to help your kids. So it's really about how can you prepare and do your research in advance, and then presenting it so that together you can still have that conversation again. You can still plan together. Eileen is saying, definitely the language thing is an issue with my husband. I know enough Spanish to be comfortable, and he never took any language classes. I still don't know how to scroll to see the whole message. Okay, there you go. Any language classes while in school, and learn any afterwards. That's a big concern, right? That's definitely a legitimate concern. I think that for me, I would be okay suggesting, and I'm going to do another video about alternative destinations, why I would be comfortable with France, for example, because French is my first language and my husband speaks French. But I would be comfortable as well with any Spanish speaking country because I'm fluent in Spanish too, although my husband is not. And so for me, it's great because I'd be like, whatever, I can speak Spanish, I'm fine. But would he be comfortable with it? I believe he would be comfortable because language would not be the first barrier for him. It wouldn't be, I think that because he's been in enough situations where people didn't necessarily speak English, that he was able to navigate the space, right? And I understand that it's still a barrier, right? But still, because I would still be able to speak Spanish, it's not like we're both blind in the situation, right? So it's like, okay, he can still rely on me for certain things, and I can still help the family as a whole. And so it would not be a deal breaker. That's what I'm trying to say. Like when we were in Mexico and I was the one ordering or having most of the conversations, it wasn't a deal breaker for him to still enjoy his time and all of that. And still knowing and being aware that he will still have to take classes. He will still have to learn, just like the kids will have to learn as well. Okay. So are the existing barriers, deal breakers, or are things that you can still work on? Okay. Again, this could be the language. This could be the distance to home. How many flights do you have to take? Maybe it's the time zone. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's the weather, right? Maybe that could be a barrier, but not a deal breaker. So trying to evaluate these things with your spouse and where you are willing to compromise. There are things in our Cameroon Cote d'Ivoire conversation, there are things that I'm willing to compromise, and there are things that he's willing to compromise on as well. So that gives that shows you that you are not fighting for this thing, right? So it's like you're both going into this discussion with good faith. So it's not like it's me, my thing, or nothing, but it's like you're willing to give here and take on that side. Okay. So let me know in the comments, like, what are the things that you are still trying to negotiate on and trying to have discussions on? And if I have more advice to give you, I'm definitely willing to come back and do another video or to give you more advice in the comments. But again, it's not an easy thing to do because, I mean, the proof is that, okay, we're still like in the decision, even though like he has his thing and I have my thing. And at the end of the day, I think I know which way we're going to go. Stay tuned for that. But it's not an easy decision. Mostly if you're like, I mean, for us, it's like we're not from the same area. And even if you come from the same place, like you both Americans, you come from the US, you still have different choices. Somebody wants to go to Japan, somebody else wants to go to Colombia. So what do? Totally different cultures. You have to go back to what is the purpose of the trip again? What is the purpose of this move? I talked about that, I think, on Monday. Before you decide on the destination, understand, okay, what is the goal? What is the purpose? Why are we moving in the first place? Is it to have a calm way of life that is not like busy all the time? Well, then Tokyo might not be the place for you. And then you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. let's go to Medellin, for example, because it's like a more relaxing way of life versus Tokyo, where it's like just because you've always wanted to go to Tokyo, maybe you can visit, but not necessarily live there. Okay, so go back to your why, go back to the reasons why you want to make this move. So it's not just like let's escape and just go anywhere, but a more constructive plan of okay, we want this. Okay, so let's look at the different destinations and then let's look at the pros and the cons of each and where we're willing to compromise. Okay, at the end of the day, I think for most things in marriage, that's how it is. That's just that's just how it works, right? So for the move abroad, that's just how you're going to have to operate it as well. All right. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you think. And if you have more questions about it, or if you're like all set on your family destination and your move abroad, maybe you have to decide on the dates, maybe you have to compromise on the date, maybe you have to compromise on the location. It's all about, that's how it is, right? You are more than welcome. You are more than welcome. Thank you so much for joining me live. And if you have questions, again, let me know in the comments. If you have any ideas of topics you want me to cover on these lives, like I said, I'm going to go live Monday through Friday for the whole month of February. I have some content ideas, but if you have some ideas for me to cover, definitely let me know in the comments. That way I'll see if I can cover those topics as well. All right. Wish you a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you again on Monday. All right. Bye.